Her lipstick gleamed like a warning flare, the same crimson shade she wore when they danced under the stars years ago. Now it painted her lips like war paint, and James knew this dinner would be no celebration. In the heart of Seattle's finest restaurant, he waited, his fingers tracing the rim of a wine glass, hiding the storm brewing inside. The stellar tide buzzed with the clink of crystal and murmured conversations, its chandeliers casting a golden glow over linen-draped tables. James Clark, a 45-year-old boutique hotel magnate, sat rigid in his tailored suit, his gray eyes fixed on the entrance. Tonight marked their 15th anniversary with Emily, but the weight of that milestone felt more like a countdown than a celebration. His phone, tucked in his breast pocket, held a grainy photo he'd snapped an hour earlier. Her car, parked outside the Westin Hotel across town, its custom license plate glinting under a street lamp. A gift from him back when love still felt like a promise. She was late, 27 minutes to be precise. Not traffic, not a meeting, not the excuses she'd likely weave. James sipped his Pinot Noir, the bitterness mirroring his mood. The restaurant's hum faded as he replayed the months of clues. Her distant smiles, the unfamiliar perfume, the late-night team calls that left her glowing in a way he hadn't seen in years. He'd played the fool, but not tonight. Tonight, he was the hunter, and she didn't even know she was prey. When Emily finally swept in, heads turned. Her silk dress hugged her frame, and that red lipstick caught the light like a beacon. But her eyes, those sharp, hazel eyes that once sparkled for him, skipped over James as if he were part of the decor. She slid into the booth without a word, her coat still on, and reached for the wine list. No kiss, no apology, just a curt, "Hey," as if they were strangers splitting a cab. "Traffic?" James asked, his voice low, almost too calm. He unfolded his napkin, smoothing it across his lap with deliberate care. "Something like that," Emily muttered, her gaze glued to the menu. Her phone lit up on the table, a notification flashing briefly before she angled it away. James caught the name, Nathan, her colleague, her lie. He leaned back, the leather booth creaking under his weight. "Rough day at the office?" he pressed, his tone laced with just enough curiosity to sound innocent. Emily's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Just the usual. Deadlines, you know." Her phone buzzed again, and this time she didn't hide it. Her fingers hovered over the screen, and a faint, private smile curved her mouth. The kind she used to reserve for him, back when they'd stay up late quoting old sci-fi movies. Now, it was for Nathan, and the sting of that truth burned deeper than James expected. He swirled his wine, watching the liquid catch the light. "You seem distracted," he said, his words measured, testing the waters. Her eyes flicked up, sharp and defensive. "It's just work, James. Relax." She tapped out a quick reply on her phone, her nails clicking against the screen, then set it face up as if daring him to comment. Another buzz, another smile, another knife in his chest. The waiter arrived, breaking the tension. "Ahi tuna for the lady, French onion soup for you, sir," he said, setting the plates down with a practiced flourish. Emily barely glanced at her food, her attention locked on her phone. James stirred his soup, the steam curling up to warm his face, but it did nothing to thaw the ice in his veins. He knew the truth, had known it for months. The late nights, the conferences with no swag, the emerald earrings she claimed were a team gift. He'd hired a private investigator, a grizzled man named Reed who delivered evidence like a dealer passing cards. Photos, receipts, texts, each one a brick in the wall James had built, waiting for this moment. He didn't need to see her phone to know who was texting. Nathan Wheeler, her director of business development. Married, charming, and reckless enough to think he could steal another man's wife in plain sight. James had seen them together at her company's spring mixer, Nathan's wink across the room, Emily's quick blush. She'd called it nothing, but James wasn't blind. Not then, not now. The phone buzzed again, and Emily's smile widened, her fingers twitching as if itching to reply. James set his spoon down, the clink loud in the quiet space between them. "Something funny?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with steel. She looked up, caught off guard, and for a split second, guilt flashed in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that familiar tilt of her chin, the one she used when she thought she'd won. "Just a meme from the team," she said, shrugging. "You wouldn't get it." James nodded, letting the lie settle like dust. He reached into his jacket, his movements slow, deliberate. Inside his pocket was an envelope, plain, white, sealed with a gold sticker. Inside it, his trump card. A divorce notice, a prenup clause, and a meticulously compiled dossier of her betrayal. Photos of her slipping into Nathan's car, laughing with her hand on his chest. Hotel receipts charged to Nathan's personal card, not the company's. Screenshots of texts, her words dripping with promises she'd never kept to James. "You're the only reason I get out of bed. I want to wake up next to you permanently." He didn't pull the envelope out. Not yet. The moment wasn't ripe. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, and fixed her with a look that made her pause mid-sip. "Happy anniversary, Emily," he said, his voice soft but heavy with intent. Her brow furrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Yeah, you too," she said, her tone flat, distracted. She reached for her wine, oblivious to the storm about to break. James smiled, small and cold. He'd waited months for this, built his case with the precision of a man who'd learned never to trust blindly. 12 years ago, Emily had laughed at their prenup, signing it with a glass of cheap Chardonnay in hand, calling it paranoid paperwork. She'd never read Clause 14C, the one that stripped her of everything if she strayed. She thought James was predictable, a steady flame she could dim at will. She was wrong. The waiter returned, offering dessert. "Crème brûlée for two?" he suggested, sensing the tension but keeping his smile. "Perfect," James said, his eyes never leaving Emily. She nodded absently, her phone buzzing again. As the waiter walked away, James leaned back, his fingers brushing the envelope in his pocket. The torch for the crème brûlée flickered in the kitchen window, a tiny flame that reminded him of the fire he was about to unleash. Emily thought she held all the cards. She didn't know the deck was stacked, and James was ready to deal. Emily scooped a bite of crème brûlée, her spoon cracking the caramelized sugar with a delicate tap. "This place hasn't changed," she said, her voice light, as if they were just catching up. "Still the best dessert in Seattle." Her phone buzzed again, and her eyes darted to the screen, a smile flickering before she caught herself and looked up. "So, how's the new property deal going?" James tilted his head, playing along. "Smoothly. Signed the lease last week." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "You'd know if you'd been around more." His tone was casual, but the jab landed. Emily's smile tightened, her spoon pausing mid-air. "Work's been crazy," she said, shrugging. "You know how it is. Campaigns, clients, late nights." She sipped her wine, avoiding his gaze. The lie was so practiced it almost sounded true. Almost. James nodded, stirring his own dessert. He thought back to the first clue 6 months ago at her company's gala. Emily, radiant in a black velvet dress, had laughed a little too long at Nathan Wheeler's jokes. Nathan, her director of business development, had a reputation for charm and a marriage he seemed to forget when Emily was near. James had complimented her emerald necklace that night, one he didn't recognize. "Team gift," she'd said, brushing it off. But the matching cufflinks she gave him weeks later, same stone, same setting, told a different story. A reckless move, as if she wanted to be caught. That was when he hired Reed, a private investigator who operated like a ghost. Reed's reports were clinical, devastating. Photos of Emily slipping into Nathan's car outside a downtown cocktail lounge, her hand lingering on his chest, receipts from a Chicago hotel, charged to Nathan's personal card for a conference Emily never mentioned, screenshots of texts, pulled from a cloud backup she didn't know they shared. "I can't wait to leave this behind and start over with you," she'd written. James had read it at 2 a.m., alone in their home office, the words carving a hole in his chest. He kept quiet, building his case. The prenup, signed 12 years ago, was his shield. Emily had mocked it back then, scrawling her name with a laugh, tipsy on cheap wine. Clause 14C was clear. Infidelity meant she'd walk away with nothing. No house, no savings, no slice of his empire. She thought it was a relic, forgotten in a safe. James hadn't forgotten. Back at the table, Emily's phone lit up again. She didn't bother hiding it this time, typing a quick reply, her lips curving in that secret smile. James's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Nathan keeping you busy?" he asked, dropping the name like a stone in still water. Her fingers froze, her eyes snapping to his. For a moment, panic flickered, but she covered it with a laugh. "What? Oh yeah, he's swamped with the new campaign. Always texting about deadlines." She set her phone down, face up, as if to prove she had nothing to hide. The screen went dark, but not before James caught another notification. "Miss you already." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Must be some campaign. You've been out late a lot." His eyes locked on hers, searching for a crack in her facade. She held his gaze, but her hand twitched, betraying her. "It's just work, James," she said, her tone sharper now. "You used to get it. Running a business isn't exactly a 9 to 5. She reached for her wine, but her hand shook slightly, the glass clinking against the table. James sat back, letting her squirm. He thought of the second breadcrumb 3 months ago. Emily had claimed a weekend conference in Dallas, but her suitcase returned pristine. No swag, no lanyards. She loved those. A quick check of their shared credit card showed a charge in Chicago, not Dallas. 2 nights, a minibar tab with Pinot Grigio. She hated Pinot. Reed's photos confirmed it. Emily and Nathan, arm in arm, entering a boutique hotel. James had saved the evidence in a folder labeled Endgame, each file a step toward this night. The waiter passed by, offering more wine. James waved him off, his focus on Emily. "You ever think about slowing down?" he asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Spending more time at home? With me?" She sighed, setting her spoon down. "James, don't start. I'm doing what I need to do for my career. You of all people should understand ambition." Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at it, her face softening. That was the moment James felt the last thread of patience snap. He reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the envelope. Not yet, he told himself. He wanted her to dig deeper, to think she was still in control. "Ambition," he repeated, nodding. "Funny how it looks different for everyone." His eyes flicked to her phone, then back to her. Some people chase deals. Others chase something else. Emily's brow furrowed, her guard slipping. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice tight. She leaned forward, as if daring him to accuse her outright. The air between them crackled, the restaurant's warmth doing nothing to ease the chill. James smiled, cold and deliberate. "Just an observation," he said, his hand still in his pocket, gripping the envelope. He thought of the final piece of evidence, the one that sealed his resolve. A week ago, Reed had intercepted a calendar invite, labeled Team Sync, set for a Friday night at the Weston's bar. No laptops, no agendas, just Emily and Nathan, laughing over martinis. James had driven by that night, parked across the street, and snapped the photo of her car. The image was blurry, but the truth was crystal clear. He'd spent the last week with his lawyer, a sharp woman named Clara who'd handled his father's estate. Clara had reviewed the prenup, the evidence, and nodded once. "She's done," she'd said, sliding the divorce notice across her desk. "Serve it whenever you're ready." James had chosen tonight, their anniversary, not for cruelty, but for poetic justice. Let her savor her dessert before the world she'd built collapsed. Emily pushed her plate away, her appetite gone. "You're acting weird," she said, her voice a mix of irritation and unease. "If you've got something to say, just say it." James met her gaze, his heart steady now, the storm inside him calm. "Oh, I will," he said, his fingers tightening on the envelope. "But let's finish dessert first." The torch in the kitchen flared again, a reminder of the fire he was about to ignite. Emily had no idea the game was already over, and James held the winning hand. Her world was about to shatter, and she didn't even see the cracks. James's hand rested on the envelope, a guillotine waiting to fall. In the flickering light of the stellar tide, Emily's crimson lips parted in a half-smile, oblivious to the endgame unfolding across the table. The restaurant hummed with soft jazz and clinking glasses, but the air between James and Emily crackled like a storm about to break. James Clark, 45, had spent months building a fortress of evidence, each piece a brick in the wall that would seal Emily's fate. Her phone buzzed again, Nathan's name flashing briefly before she silenced it with a tap. She thought she was untouchable, her lies woven tight enough to fool him. She was wrong. James leaned back, his gray eyes studying her with the calm of a man who'd already won. "You're enjoying that creme brulee," he said, his voice smooth, almost playful. "Reminds me of our first anniversary. You burned the sugar yourself, remember? Nearly set the kitchen on fire." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Emily's laugh was forced, a thin veneer over her unease. "Yeah, I was terrible at it. Good thing you're better with a torch." She scooped another bite, her movements deliberate, as if focusing on the dessert could deflect his intensity. Her phone lit up again, and this time she didn't touch it, letting it sit like a ticking bomb between them. He tilted his head, his fingers brushing the envelope in his pocket. "Funny how fire works," he said. "It's beautiful until it consumes everything." The words hung heavy, and for the first time, Emily's smile faltered. She set her spoon down, her hazel eyes narrowing. "What's with you tonight?" she asked, her tone sharp but unsteady. "You're acting like I've done something wrong." She leaned forward, her voice dropping. "If you've got a problem, James, just spit it out." He held her gaze, letting the moment stretch until the silence felt like a blade. Then, slowly, he pulled the envelope from his pocket and placed it on the table, its white surface stark against the dark linen. The gold sticker sealing it caught the light, glinting like a warning. Emily's eyes flicked to it, then back to him, confusion creeping into her expression. "Happy anniversary," James said, his voice low, final. He slid the envelope toward her, brushing her phone as he did. The screen lit up. Another message from Nathan. "Can't stop thinking about you." The words glowed like a confession, and James's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. Emily stared at the envelope, her fingers hovering over it as if it might bite. "What's this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around, suddenly aware of the other diners, the weight of their private war in this public space. "Open it," James said, his tone calm but unyielding. He leaned back, folding his hands, watching her like a predator sizing up its prey. The restaurant's warmth did nothing to ease the chill settling over the table. She peeled back the sticker, her movements slow, cautious. The first page slid out and her breath caught. The bold header read, "Notice of intent to divorce and enforcement of prenuptial agreement, Clause 14C. Her eyes darted across the text, widening with each line. She flipped to the next page, Exhibit A, timeline of documented infidelity, and her hand trembled. Photos followed, her entering the Westin with Nathan, her hand on his arm. A cocktail lounge moment, her leaning into him, laughing. A Chicago hotel receipt, Nathan's card, champagne and breakfast in bed. This is insane, she whispered, her voice cracking. She looked up, her face pale, the crimson lipstick stark against her ashen skin. You've been spying on me? James tilted his head, his expression cold. You made it easy, Emily. You were sloppy. He sipped his espresso, the tiny cup steady in his hand. Hotel charges on his card, texts on our shared cloud, calendar invites for team syncs at bars. You didn't even try to hide it. Her mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting to the pages like they might rewrite themselves. This isn't what you think, she said, her voice rising, desperate. Nathan and I, it's just work. We're close, sure, but it's professional. You're twisting this. James flipped the stack to a highlighted page, a screenshot of her text. You're the only reason I get out of bed. I want to wake up next to you permanently. Professional, he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Tell me, does his wife know about your work ethic? Emily's face crumpled, her bravado collapsing. You went into my phone? She hissed, clutching the papers. That's illegal, James. You can't do this. He smiled, unshaken. Shared iCloud, Emily. You synced it yourself. Very thoughtful. He leaned forward, his voice low, lethal. But let's talk about illegal. Like using company funds for your little getaways. I sent a copy of this to your board. Nathan's HR team got one too. They're reviewing it as we speak. Her eyes widened, panic flooding her expression. You what? She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking as she unlocked it. The screen was a flurry of notifications, missed calls, texts, emails. Her breath hitched as she scrolled, the reality sinking in. You're ruining my life, she whispered, tears welling but not falling. James set his cup down, the clink loud in the tense silence. You did that yourself, he said. I just documented it. He waved to the waiter, signaling for the check, his movements calm, deliberate. You thought I was blind, Emily. You thought I'd sit here year after year, while you and Nathan laughed behind my back. But I've been watching, and I'm done playing your fool. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling, the prenup signature page glaring up at her. Her own handwriting, 12 years old, binding her to this moment. James, please, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It was a mistake. I felt alone. You were always working, always distant. He leaned in, his eyes hard. I paid the mortgage. I built your home office. I hosted your family's Christmas while you texted Nathan from our guest room. Don't tell me you were alone. His voice was steady, each word a hammer. You chose this, and now you live with it. The waiter arrived with the check, oblivious to the wreckage at the table. James handed him a card, his eyes never leaving Emily. She clutched the envelope, her knuckles white, as if holding it tighter could undo the truth. We can fix this, she said, her voice barely audible. We can talk, go to counseling. I'll end it with him. Please, James. He stood, buttoning his coat, his silhouette sharp against the restaurant's glow. You had dessert, he said, his voice a quiet blade. I brought the bill. He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back. Oh, and check Nathan's LinkedIn. He's had a rough day. Emily's phone buzzed again, but she didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the papers, the prenup's clause 14C burning into her mind. Infidelity meant no house, no assets, no mercy. James walked away, the restaurant's chatter swallowing his steps, leaving her alone with the ruins of her choices. The life she'd built was crumbling, and Emily couldn't outrun the debris. James had struck with surgical precision, leaving her exposed in the ruins of her own lies. As he walked away from the stellar tide, the Seattle night swallowed him, but the fire he'd ignited was just beginning to spread. Emily sat frozen at the table, the envelope's contents splayed before her like a crime scene. Her phone, once a lifeline to Nathan, now buzzed with unread messages. each one a nail in the coffin of her carefully curated world. The prenup's clause 14C stared back at her, its words unyielding. Infidelity meant no claim to the house, the savings, or James's empire. Her signature, scrawled in carefree ink 12 years ago, was a trap she'd set for herself. She shoved the papers into her purse, her hands shaking, and stumbled out of the restaurant, the clink of glasses fading behind her. Across town, Nathan Wheeler was learning the cost of his own arrogance. At 8:15 that morning, a manila envelope had landed on his assistant's desk at Pinnacle Marketing, labeled for HR, urgent. No return address, just a typed note and a stack of documents. Screenshots of texts between him and Emily, flirty and damning. Expense reports highlighting client dinners that matched their hotel stays. Calendar entries for off-site sinks at bars, not boardrooms. A highlighted section outlined violations of company policies, ethics, conduct, and travel reimbursement, cross-referenced with brutal clarity. By noon, Nathan's key card was deactivated. By 3 p.m., his internal accounts were frozen. By 5 o'clock, his LinkedIn profile read open to work, his title as Director of Business Development erased from the org chart. He tried calling Emily, but her phone was off, buried in her purse as she sped toward her sister's house. Nathan's texts piled up, shifting from confusion to panic. What the hell is going on? HR called me in. Then, did you tell him? Finally, we're screwed. He didn't know James had orchestrated it all. A chess master moving pieces while Nathan played checkers. Emily pulled into Kate's driveway, the Queen and Hill glowing with stately homes under the moonlight. She sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, her breath shallow. The prenup's terms echoed in her mind. No assets, no alimony, just the clothes on her back and the shame she'd earned. She'd thought James was predictable, a man too steady to fight back. She'd been wrong, and the weight of that mistake crushed her. Kate's front door opened, her silhouette sharp against the porch light. Emily stumbled out, clutching her purse, and collapsed into her sister's arms. He knows, she sobbed, her voice raw. James knows everything. He's taking it all, the house, the money, my life. Kate's face was stone, her arms stiff. She pulled back, her blue eyes cold. Come inside, she said, her voice flat. They sat in the living room, the tick of a grandfather clock slicing the silence. Emily spilled it all, the texts, the hotels, Nathan, her words a desperate plea for sympathy. But Kate's expression didn't soften. I told you to stop, Kate said, crossing her arms. 3 months ago, when you bragged about Nathan at brunch, I warned you. James called me last month, Emily. He didn't want pity. He just wanted someone to know. Someone who might talk you down before you burned everything. She leaned forward, her voice low. You didn't listen. Emily's mouth fell open, tears streaming. You knew? And you didn't tell me? Her voice cracked, betrayal piling onto betrayal. Kate's laugh was bitter. Like you told James about Nathan? You mocked him, Em. You called him boring, said he'd never leave. You thought he was furniture, not a man. She stood, pacing. He's not the one who broke this. You did. Emily buried her face in her hands, sobs shaking her shoulders. I thought he'd forgive me, she whispered. I thought he's James. He never fights back. Kate stopped, her voice granite. That's your mistake. You didn't see him. You never did. She sat, softer now. He's not cruel, Em. He's just done. Emily's phone buzzed in her purse, but she ignored it, too afraid to face Nathan's fallout or the board's emails. She'd learned soon enough. Pinnacle's HR had launched an investigation, and her role as senior marketing strategist was under review. The company card she'd used for client dinners was flagged, her expense reports audited. Her career, like Nathan's, was teetering on a cliff. Back at his downtown condo, James poured a glass of Cabernet, the city skyline glittering beyond his floor-to-ceiling windows. The sale of his latest hotel property had closed that afternoon, a nine-figure deal that left him untouchable. He'd kept the core assets, the brand, the legacy his father had entrusted him. The prenup ensured Emily got nothing, but this wasn't about money. It was about truth. His phone pinged, a text from Sarah, his assistant of 7 years. "Dinner tomorrow? Congrats on the deal." He smiled, typing back, 8 p.m. "Can't wait." Sarah had been his quiet ally, organizing his files, notarizing the divorce papers, never missing a beat. Emily had called her functional, a background player. She hadn't noticed Sarah's loyalty, her sharp mind. James had. He leaned back, the wine warming his throat. Emily's Google alerts still tracked him. She'd see the press release about the sale, his name alongside Sarah's as the new COO. The irony was delicious. Emily, who'd chased status, was now irrelevant, while Sarah, who'd earned her place, stood at his side. Emily's final text came as he set his glass down. "I'm sorry. I was stupid. You were the best thing I had." No punctuation, as if she hoped for a reply, a crack in his resolve. James stared at the words, then typed, "You never read the contract. Not the one you signed or the one I lived by." He hit send, then blocked her number, the thread vanishing like smoke. The city lights pulsed below, and James raised his glass, toasting to a future unburdened by her lies. Emily's world was collapsing, but his was just beginning, built on the ashes of her betrayal. The ashes of betrayal settled, but James rose from them, unscarred and unbroken. Emily's world had collapsed under the weight of her own choices, while he stood taller, his future gleaming like Seattle's skyline at dawn. In the quiet of his new life, he toasted to truths revealed and bridges burned. James Clark, now 46, leaned against the glass railing of his penthouse balcony, the city's lights pulsing below like a heartbeat. The corner unit, with its sleek lines and remote-controlled blinds, was a far cry from the queen and home he'd once shared with Emily. That house, with its sage-green kitchen and ironic throw pillows, was his before their marriage, funded by his father's trust and renovated with his own hands. The prenup, Clause 14C, ensured it stayed his, untouched by her claims. Emily had called it our dream house, but dreams built on lies crumble fast. 2 weeks had passed since their anniversary dinner at the Stellar Tide, where James had laid bare her infidelity with a single envelope. The fallout was swift, surgical. Emily's career at Pinnacle Marketing hung by a thread, her expense reports under audit, her title under review. Nathan Wheeler, her once charming director, was a ghost in the corporate world, his LinkedIn profile a tombstone. Open to work. Their affair, exposed by James's meticulously compiled evidence, had cost them everything: status, security, each other. James hadn't needed to raise his voice. The truth was loud enough. He sipped his Cabernet, the wine's richness grounding him. The sale of his latest hotel property, a 9-figure deal, had closed days after the dinner, a strategic move that handed operations to a private equity group while he retained the brand and key assets. His father would have called it keeping the spine. James called it freedom. The press release had hit the trades, his name in bold: James Clark, Chairman, Clark Properties. Below it, a new title: Sarah Jensen, Chief Operating Officer. Emily's Google alerts, still tethered to his name, would have delivered the news like a slap. Sarah, the assistant Emily had dismissed as functional beige, was now his right hand, her loyalty and sharpness finally in the spotlight. Sarah had been there through it all, organizing his files, notarizing the divorce papers, catching details Emily never bothered to notice. When Emily mocked James's boring life, Sarah saw his discipline, his quiet strength. A week ago, over coffee at a waterfront cafe, Sarah had asked, "You ever think about slowing down?" Her smile was warm, not probing, but James caught the subtext. He'd grinned, saying, "Maybe. Got any plans to join me?" Her laugh had been the first real lightness he'd felt in months. Now his phone pinged. A text from Sarah. Dinner at 8? New spot on Pike Street. He typed back, count me in. The exchange was simple, but it carried weight. A promise of something new. Not romance, not yet, but a partnership built on trust. The kind Emily had never understood. Emily's final attempt at reconciliation had come 3 days ago. A desperate email. Her number was blocked. Her texts a dead end. I was wrong, James. I threw away the best thing I had. Can we talk? The words were raw, but hollow, like a script she hoped would rewrite the past. James hadn't replied. He'd forwarded it to his lawyer, Clara, with a note. File it. Clara had called him later, her voice dry. She's grasping at straws. Mediation's set for next week. She gets nothing. James had nodded, unsurprised. Emily had never read the real contract, the one that demanded loyalty, not just signatures. Mediation was a formality, the prenup's terms ironclad. Emily had tried to argue emotional investment, claiming she'd made their house a home. The mediator, a no-nonsense woman named Helen, had slid a stack of receipts across the table. Every renovation, every appliance, every tax-deductible upgrade, traced to James's premarital trust. Emily's lawyer shifted uncomfortably, his pen still. She'd walked away with her clothes, her jewelry, none of Nathan's gifts, and a suitcase of regrets. The house's deed, always in James's name, was hers only in delusion. She'd lingered in the driveway that final day, sitting on her luggage, waiting for a miracle that never came. Kate, her sister, had pulled up, popped the trunk, and driven off without a word. Kate's last call to James had been brief. She's with me. She'll survive. You did the right thing. James had thanked her, not for support, but for honesty. Kate had seen Emily's betrayal for what it was. A choice, not a mistake. James set his glass down, the skyline's glow reflecting in his eyes. He thought of Emily's downfall, not with glee, but with clarity. She'd mistaken his silence for weakness, his loyalty for a leash. But he wasn't the man she'd assumed, a tired husband clinging to routine. He was a strategist, a survivor, a man who'd learned to protect what mattered. The city hummed below, alive with possibility. James's empire was stronger than ever. His team, Sarah at the helm, poised for growth. He'd lost a marriage, but gained a truth. Trust was earned, not owed. Emily's name was a closed chapter, her alerts a fading echo. Sarah's text lit up his phone again. Pike Street's got oysters. You in? He smiled, typing, wouldn't miss it. He raised his glass one last time, toasting to the life ahead, clean, honest, and his own. The Seattle dawn was breaking, and James Clark was ready to meet it.